We're going to look at the Cold War and how that affected the tensions, the Arab-Israeli conflict, which we'll be spending quite a bit of discussion and activities on, and also the Persian Gulf, which we've mentioned already, but we'll get more in depth. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union tried to protect their waterways, their access to oil, and of course, the rivalry between the two superpowers extended all throughout the world, not just throughout Europe and Asia, but also the Middle East, and tried to line up as many allies, particularly those who had important natural resources that would help. And then each superpower would prop up dictators or regimes that would be allies of theirs by giving them or selling arms and training as well as trade. The Arab-Israeli conflict that we've talked about already, the United States has pretty much always sided with Israel and has pledged to defend Israel. Some presidents have pledged more strongly than others to defend Israel against any hostilities from the Arab neighbors. And this has become still a global concern today on which world powers take which side in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Currently, Russia, as a major power today still, has sided more with the Palestinians, and America continues to support Israel for the most part. So after many attempts at peace, most recently the Roadmap to Peace by George W. Bush, these fightings have continued. The peace talks continue, but they pretty much always fall apart. And some more radicals insist that Israel has no right to exist. And on the other hand, more radical Israelis insist that they should not divide Jerusalem up at all or any of the areas that also belongs to Israel. So these are some of the ongoing conflicts that we've already discussed. You can tell from some of the things we discussed earlier, the Sinai Peninsula, which was returned to Egypt now, and then some of the disputed areas, the Golan Heights, and obviously the West Bank, where major settlements are. And if you follow the news at all currently, these are still being debated. The PLO was led for many years by one Yasser Arafat, who died about 10 years ago in 2004. And since then, the PLO, it's called, has been governed by Mohammed Abbas, who currently is leading the movement. People weren't quite sure what direction he would take that group, but it has remained quite hostile to Jewish control of those regions we discussed. Also, in neighboring Lebanon, there was much upheaval throughout the 70s and early 80s with civil war in Lebanon. And going on in Beirut was pretty much a battleground all the way through to the mid-1980s, with many refugees fleeing the fighting and many different countries, multinational forces trying to keep peace in Lebanon. Today, there are still PLO refugee camps in Lebanon. There are also training camps in southern Lebanon for more radicals, so this is continuing to be an ongoing problem. Although there is peace generally in Lebanon and Beirut is fairly safe today, there is still these tensions due to the Palestinian overflow. The PLO, as I said, uses Lebanon as a base, and also today still, not just in the 1980s, but even now today, the PLO uses Lebanon as a base to launch missiles and other attacks, including bombings, as you read here, on targets. Let's move on to Iraq and the Gulf Wars that we have talked a little bit about. Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party seized control in 1979 and controlled it all the way up till 2003. In 1991, they But before that, even in the 1980s, Saddam Hussein and his lieutenants uh, conducted war on their own people, different factions of different Muslim factions or ethnic factions like the Kurds, and they also fought a 10-year-long border dispute with Iran. So Iraq was no stranger to conflict at this time. And then around 1990, they began moving into the oil-rich neighboring country, Kuwait. And Kuwait then requested assistance, in which the United States led a multinational force to oust Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi military from Kuwait, which was successful, driving them back, creating no-fly zones according to the treaty, which then, as you know, Saddam Hussein violated for several years during the Bill Clinton era. And when George W. Bush became president, he tried to enforce those stipulations of the Treaty of 1991 with Saddam Hussein, which they thought he was bluffing, but instead, in 2003, U.S. and most of the U.S. and British forces came and took over Iraq in 2003. In a matter of a few weeks, they were conquered Baghdad and removed Saddam Hussein from power. And to this day, Iraq is struggling with possible civil war and unrest, and trying to develop still a stable government in Iraq. It's an ongoing issue there. So those were the two recent wars in Iraq, in the Middle East, that were largely fought by American soldiers.